Incoming transmission.
Hey everybody. Hey Jono. Hi guys on the Cuchulainn. It's another Sunday and it's another EXO Chat Live. And with the sad news of Mira Furlan's passing there the other day, I thought it would be a good thing to reminisce about Babylon 5 and some of the amazing characters that, have been on the show, and the actors that we have lost in the last few years. Delenn being, Mira Furlan's character, and such an amazing character she was. Most shows I think focus on the captain, and then definitely Sinclair in the first season and Sheridan were important characters. But in many ways, I think Delenn was the linchpin of the show, and connected it from exactly, and connected from really the pilot in The Gathering right up until the very end. So I thought we'd explore her character and some of the other characters as well, which I think most people would say was one of Babylon 5's greatest strengths, was its character building. So as usual, if anybody wants to make a comment, just put it in there. We'll have a look and see if we can respond to you. If you'd like to join the chat on the stream, let us know. We can send you the link for that as well. So just to start off then, John, Delenn, what would you say as a character? What was her strengths?
I think Delenn. Oh, that's how to word that properly. I mean, Delenn was the backbone of Babylon 5. I think because there's so many other characters that changed. So many other characters that went through, so many other characters that disappeared, were replaced for various different reasons, both story and real life influences.
Yeah.
But Mira's character, Delenn, she was there from the start. She was there from The Gathering, the pilot movie, and the only thing that changed for Mira was her makeup. But her character was the calming influence. She was almost like she was this strange counselor to begin with, and then but as her story arc progressed, she went from being the strange counselor to, once you got to know her a bit better, she was she knew, you realize she knows more than she's saying. And as and then she knows more than she's saying, but she was always trying to guide. I think she was always trying to guide. Doesn't matter which commander it was of the station. I think she was trying to guide everybody in the right direction with all the expansive knowledge and all the secrets that she knew. She was always looking for the best direction for people to go, and that was the strength of the character. With it, she was the ultimate. She was the ultimate guiding light for Babylon 5. And whether or not that was JMS's intention from the get-go, probably was. But that's I think that's, to me, that's how I would kind of sum up her character.
I would as well. And I mean, I find that, considering, the Minbari have a very strong belief system, and, they have the different, the castes that they would operate from, whether it's the worker caste or the religious caste or the warrior caste. They managed to do that without, going too much into, say, religion or anything like that, and yet still managed to portray that. She was very spiritual.
Yeah.
But as you get to know more and more about her character, you saw the inner strength there, and, the potential to be quite the warrior as well as time went on. One of the things I really enjoyed about the show, particularly the first couple of seasons, as the mystery of what the story was going to be was just starting to unfold. It was just how mysterious she was.
Yeah.
Especially in the first season, I think, where, they were going down the direction of who Sinclair was. And obviously that was meant to go through the entire show. That didn't happen. But still, while they were building that mystery, she was a central part of that. You could tell that she knew more about Sinclair than he knew about himself,
Yeah.
And they developed that and continued with it. And again, it was just one of her strengths of character. As a race, the Minbari, what did you think of them as a race? I think she was like the ultimate Minbari, but as a race on a sci-fi show, I felt like they were quite a contradiction. When you meet Naroon, when you meet some of the others, you find that these casts really there's conflict between them as well. Again, something I thought was really well written.
Well, yeah, I mean, as JMS went through the show, obviously things had to develop. He'd go one direction and decide, okay, I'm not liking that too much, or I might have to develop this a bit more. They became a very well-rounded species because they were so integral to the previous war and the current war. The Minbari, as he developed them, were the race that were not quite as advanced as the Vorlons and the Shadows, but they were the next
ones, yeah.
The next step away. And then, like the Minbari and the Centauri and the Narn, they're only a couple of 100 years ahead of Earth, but the Minbari are vastly ahead of them. But they have to.
Isn't it in the beginning where Londo was having a meeting with the Earth Command and they are asking him what do they know about the Minbari, and it's one of the things he says is like when they were expanding, going out and conquering and exploring the galaxy, the one thing they did was never bother the Minbari.
Yeah.
And what one thing say, if you leave them alone, they will leave you alone.
Yeah, right.
And,
I wonder if there's an expanded story that JMS had in his head or never told, or is something that I wonder did anybody approach in fanfic. The first Centauri encounter with the Minbari. They didn't go to war, but what was the Centauri reaction? Or did they just skirt the border, see a ship with open gun ports, and went, "No, we're going over here. Screw that. That thing's colossal." Whereas the humans were the ones who went, "Yeah, you know what? What? They're opening their gun ports. Well, open up." What they didn't open theirs. What did they do? The humans.
Well, the Minbari, as a sign of respect, they go with their gun ports open to show their strength is the thing. And the commander on can't remember the name of the ship now that engages them, took that as a threat. And, essentially started the war. And again, it was a demonstration of just how far more powerful the Minbari were, and as you go into the show, you discover they are not the most powerful. Like as you get to know more about the Vorlons and the Shadows, you realize that they're almost like the first ones.
Yeah.
With the Minbari.
So many steps of evolution.
Evolution, as the races progressed,
Exactly.
And Delenn, I kind of portrayed that extremely well. From the very beginning, as she was talking to Sinclair and the gathering, and they were sitting in the Zen garden, and explaining to him, well, you have this Zen garden, but you're obviously not spending enough time looking at it, to see what one person can do. If you throw a pebble in the stand and you see how it ripples, what one individual can do depending on the choices that they make,
Yeah.
And she was always seen to be a mentor to Sinclair or Sheridan as the show went on, It's like she was very much the heart of the show.
Yes, she was also, like I said, the guiding element, because she knows of the teachings and the writings of Delenn. So, I can't, it's been a couple of years since I watched the entirety of the show, but did she ever reveal that she knew Valen from the day she met him, or was it something she discovered along the way herself? I think she knew from day one when Sinclair walked on the station who he was, right?
Yes, because I wouldn't want to give too much away in case I know there's a few who are starting to watch it.
Oh no!
Yes,
Babylon 5, 20
years. But yes,
we have to be careful of spoilers. Holy shit!
Yes,
it's very difficult to discuss Babylon 5 and the it's spoiling.
Exactly, because there's so much story to it, But in many ways, I actually envy them as they, find this journey for the first time,
Yeah, the link of, was it Babylon Square? That's the first season episode, isn't it?
That's the first season episode.
Yeah, that doesn't get resolved. Like the second part of that story isn't until season 3.
Until season 3, yeah. And the way it's resolved is just it's incredible writing, and story arc for both Mira Furlan's Delenn there and Sinclair in that particular story arc was just fantastic.
Yeah.
But you do, she knows, and you find that out much earlier.
Yeah. She knows who he is, and yeah. Well, I mean, he was supposed to stay on the station, so. Michael O'Hare, he had problems, unfortunately, the different things, and so unfortunately he had to leave, and which kind of screwed up JMS and his original story, because Sinclair was going to be there all the way up until War Without End, but unfortunately the actor had to leave, and then Bruce obviously got a job. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So who's that? Somebody saying Antoinette's here for the spoilers.
Here for the spoilers, is she? Yeah, I don't know why I'm not seeing that on my Facebook. And while we're there, just say hello to Lee and Michael and Anita. Hi guys, thanks for joining us. Any questions, put in the comments. And again, as I say, anybody want to join us in the chat, let us know. We'll send you a link.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's true. And it's Antoinette. It's actually almost impossible to talk B5 now without talking about spoilers, because the stories are so interwoven. Like,
we should really put that say that now, because we've already.
I'll say it now.
Like Frank says, it's very difficult to discuss Babylon 5. It's in its entirety, and the work of Mira Furlan throughout all the seasons she was in, without discussing, well, this happened because of that. Like there's stuff that happens in season 5. That's goes
back even to season 1.
Season 1. Like there's somebody says something that's going to happen, and that can happen until 5 years later.
So you look at it and you're going, so that was a bit. That's what they were on about in season 1. Oh, okay, yeah, and you see how it connects between the seasons in between as well. So
yeah, I mean, there's moments for different characters, like and unfortunately, it was Babylon 5 suffered greatly from being a very low budget show, and they did their best to keep things going. But Judy Caitlin Brown was in for one season. As Natoth.
Yeah.
They kept the Natoth story, like that's what's great about JMS when he's writing stuff and a character or an actor has to disappear. They don't disappear from the storyline. Season 4, Natoth is a reason why Jakar goes back to Narn. It's why he doesn't keep his isolation on Babylon 5. So Natoth is a reason why he goes. Even though Judy Caitlin Brown never came back to the show, so it was almost like, yes, his attaché did get reassigned, or she went and did other things, but we haven't forgotten about her. She's not just that actress disappeared, so that storyline just went chop, got rid of it, so it's that was the great thing about a lot of the stuff that they did in Babylon 5. If he wrote an episode where he had to go a certain direction, well, he gave it a reason later on down the road.
I think I remember him saying in interviews that when he wrote the Bible for the show, he did put in trapdoors. So that you always know when you're producing a show like that you may lose actors, or you may have to make changes. So he put trapdoors in every character.
Yeah.
So if the things changed, he had another direction to go in, and it's obviously probably one of the reasons why he was able to change things as smoothly as he did. Like, because when you go into the second season, and a major character change there, it's done quite smoothly. You were saying there that Sinclair was meant to be there up until War Without End. Do you feel like War Without End would have been later in the show than the third season if he had been there, or do you feel like there was going to be a change midway?
It's an interesting question now. I mean, I remember back when we first got to see it in the 90s, and everyone at VisiCon, and where Avril Cullen brought the tapes all the way over in her hand luggage from the States, and we took over the central auditorium in DCU in the middle of the night to watch these episodes that had literally just aired like days earlier, which was
in the States, which is months ahead of when we would have seen it.
Years, if not,
years.
If not a year. I don't know what the difference between it airing in the States on Warner Brothers and it airing on Channel 4 here, because obviously it was never on Irish television. It was only over on Channel 4. And as I continue, I know I jump from point to point, and because it was on Channel 4 and Channel 4 had bought it, whenever the commander had an important communication, it always came in on Channel 4. So they went
to Channel 4 taking the show, because they struggled to get networks taking them, like, you know what I mean, because like it wasn't Star Trek, but as JMS said, like fate manages, they managed to get it done, and despite all the changes and despite all the threats of cancellation, which each season as it ended, they managed to get their 5-year run, even though fifth season was a last-minute renewal. So, but they still managed to get there, which is wonderful.
That's the thing. As I've watched a couple of times on DVD, and when you watch it back, and anybody who's watching it now and they don't mind spoilers, season 5, the first half of season 5 is terrible. There's one.
I don't know if it's terrible, but it was definitely.
Let me finish the point. The first half of season 5 is terrible, except for the long night of London Lowry.
Yeah.
But the second half of season 5 gets back to where Babylon 5 was. Yeah. The first 10 episodes where JMS, the writing team, were scrambling to create story from a B plot subplot that had been dropped from the previous season, because they'd had to squeeze their entire finishing main story into season 4. And then suddenly, because they'd done that and squished so much, and it was such an action-packed season, they then, TNT are bought it, so you got a season 5. Oh, really? Oh, I wasn't expecting this. So it was.
For me, Lee, at least as he remembers trying to stay awake to watch it on Channel 4 at 3 in the morning. Yeah, the time frames were all over the place on Channel 4, weren't they?
Wow, I remember it was Channel 4, and they used to do the late night anime at the same time. Like all Channel 4 sci-fi was all like after 11 o'clock at night. It's like normal television is done with, okay, well, here's a lot of cool stuff, but we're going to do it on at late at night. So I do remember, I know another friend of mine here in Malahide, he'd have like a 4-hour VHS tape stuck in the thing, and he'd do what Lee would do, and stay up to watch it. But inevitably, you'd fall asleep or something because it was a school night for us.
Yeah.
I was in school when it was coming out, so he'd record that the whole evening's worth of science fiction fantasy stuff, all the anime and Babylon 5. So I remember, so here's a question for you. What's the first episode you saw? Where did you see it? And when did you see it?
When did I see it? Well, I saw it on Channel 4, and it would have been midnight in the firing line. I didn't see The Gathering until much later. I don't think.
Which episode is that? Is that the first
episode of season 1? Yeah.
So you managed to get in there and go, what? So what? Back in, when was that? 94.
94, 95. I can't remember which. It was in around that time. I think it came out in 94.
So The Gathering was 93. And then
we never got The Gathering.
We never got The Gathering. Oh, I see. Right. Okay. Yeah. But then this first season 1 came out in 94, which meant it would have come to Britain in 2095, possibly.
Yeah, probably in around that time frame, alright. Yeah.
Right. So, did you see a trailer? Did you see ads, or were you just channel surfing, or you knew Sci-Fi was on at that time on Channel 4? What got you to watch it?
I'm trying to remember. I think it was Dreamwatch, possibly, or SFX is one of the magazines.
Right.
I was reading them regularly at the time, and they were talking about this new sci-fi show, and it was coming in Channel 4 and all that, so I had to look out for it. If I saw something coming that was sci-fi, I would check it out anyway, Andrew Brandon says the VHS, the Gathering on VHS from a video store was hooked.
At least you got least somebody had it. I mean, nobody had it in Malahide anyway, in my area.
Yeah, or in our town either. But and it was quite a jarring to watch The Gathering so long after watching season one, because
Yeah.
so many character changes and so many. The effects with the music was different, and the weapons they had were different. Do you remember the big giant rifles they had? It looked like a plank of wood in The Gathering.
Yeah, I could probably like.
They improved that big time for the first season. They're on it.
It was a big spatula, you know.
Yeah, looked like a skateboard that had the wheels taken off.
6-foot ice cream stick,
Yeah.
and those things kept making a recurrence when somebody would have a vision, or because is it in The Gathering where the station's being destroyed, it's being invaded and being destroyed?
Not in The Gathering, no, because in The Gathering, Kosh arrives.
Right.
There's an attempted assassination, and
Sinclair
is implicated. You know, so the whole the Gathering is more like a mystery story to find out what really happened.
Murder mystery. It's a comic.
Yeah.
Who done it?
Lee Raycon was saying his first episode was Deathwalker.
Which one was that now? My episode titles aren't so good.
Deathwalker was the one with the Dilgar. You know, that race that were killing people and experimenting them on that. They create this anti-agapic that gives people like extended life.
Yeah.
But to use that, somebody else has to die. The main ingredient on it is I don't know, something life force or whatever, like, you know.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a great episode, and you know, you find it's a real indication of just where Kosh is coming from and the way he handles that. But yeah, that was and then of course the humans had united with some of the lesser races to fight and defeat the Dilgar. And this is where having defeated Dilgar, this is where the humans' arrogance and thinking, oh, we're here, like, you know, we've made a statement here, now let's go out and expand. Yeah. And they find the Minbari and you think, actually, look, we beat the Dilgar, we can deal with the Minbari. Big mistake.
Oh, there's advanced races. Oh.
Yeah. We're going to kick ass here.
yeah. Nobody can do us. We're amazing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that was Deathwalker. And Alan O'Shea, hey Al, how are you doing? So what you were saying there about season 5, just to go back to that, like you know, absolutely you're right. This, you know, the first half of the season was quite weak, because of the fact they had to use a B storyline. Because I think if they had been renewed in time, season 4 would have ended with the episode where Sheridan was captured and was being interrogated.
Right.
Season 5 was meant to be the first half of the season, the conclusion of the whole civil war with Earth. And then going into, as you said, the second season, which was about Centauri Prime, and it was just like right up there again, like, you know.
Yeah.
And that second half.
That's what I say about. That's what I say about Babylon 5. The best episode of the entire series is actually in the weakest season. So the best episode in the entire series is The Long Night, London Malari.
Yeah.
And it's so strong. Peter Jurassic just knocking it out of the park, you know. But it came in the middle of some very, very weak episodes. So if you gave up on it, and you'd never get to see those. So that's the thing about season 5. You have to stick with it. You know, you have to stick with a lot of like that. The telepath war should have been going on. That was a B plot to what the Shadows had been doing and how the Shadows had created telepaths. And that was the next level to that storyline. But of course, when they had to stuff things into season 4, that got pushed down. And then it was the only thing that he had left before he was like, oh, well, I have to do, oh, great. Well, this will get us to that point, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really fantastic episode. And as you say, an incredible Londo episode. So going back to, say, Mira and Delenn, what for you would be a standout moment for her character? Is there anything that most people have the same one? I'm just wondering, is it the same for you?
Standout moment. Well, there's the iconic one that gets, you know, replayed, and you see it so often on YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the quote. Is the only commander to have ever defeated a Minbari ship is behind me. You are in front of me.
If you value your lives, be somewhere
else.
Yeah.
So,
Classic. Just a great entrance.
it was such a close up on Mira for doing that, you know. It was it showed the strength of that character. It's like, no, you don't, you know, I can be nice and sweet and I'll give you tea. Don't fuck with me.
Yeah.
You know.
That's it. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
What about you? Is the same thing?
That's definitely one of the standout moments. Yeah. Yeah. Another standout moment is one that I actually put up on the Cucullin page when I heard about her passing, when she's speaking to Sheridan in the garden and talking about you know, the fact that humanity, we're all living things are part of the universe. The stars, you know, we're all cells, we're part of the universe, and we're all made of star stuff. And it was a really nice and interesting moment. Yeah. I think it was sort of like the beginning of the relationship between Sheridan and Delenn, because he sees there's much more to it than he even thought there was. Like, you know. I also love when she wrote the Great Council.
That's Andrew Brannigan is saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sebastian's interrogation of Delenn is another great one. Yeah.
I mean, I know what everybody's referring to here. So, but I'm like, I have to go back and rewatch the whole thing all over again. I'm glad I have it on DVD as well, because I don't know if anybody's actually streaming it at the moment.
I think Amazon Prime had it for a while. I don't know if they still do.
Yeah, things disappear because just on a side note, there, it's something that I always say. You know, you should always buy your favorite shows on some sort of hard media, DVD or Blu-ray, whatever it comes out on, because the contracts between all these streaming services are always going to change. Doctor Who disappeared on New Year's Day from Netflix, so you can't see Doctor Who now unless you have the DVDs. Well, I mean, like New Who from 2005 onwards. You know, so Babylon 5, I'm sure you can go up on Amazon or Zavi or somewhere will have Babylon 5. I don't know if did it ever come out in the box set. The seasons come out in the box set.
Oh, they did. Yeah, there's some great box set out there that has everything.
Yeah,
you get them quite easily.
I don't have the movies. I don't have The Gathering, and in the beginning, Third Space, River of Souls, and what was the other one?
Third Space, River of Souls, Call to Arms.
Call to Arms, the Lost Tales.
To Crusade.
Yeah, the Lost Tales.
The Lost Tales was the last one. Yeah, Legend of the Rangers.
Legend of the Rangers now wasn't great. Sorry.
Legend of the Rangers, that had an amazing weapon system. Come on.
Oh, what the person in the sun harness?
Yeah, I don't know what they were drinking when they came up with that one, like, you know. But Delenn for me, the character moments for me for Delenn, one of them is when, you know, the final episode when you know, sleeping in light and Sheridan's about to head off to cross the, you know, go beyond the rim. The emotion that was on there, displayed there, and the acting was just phenomenal between the two of them, you know. But you could really feel the emotion. There's another couple. There's a scene in the episode in season 4 that replaced Sleeping in Light when they finally got the
Go ahead, 5.
Can't think of the name of the episode now. That's annoying me. But there's a scene in there where they've gone to the future, and Delenn is a very old woman, and, you know, there's been a whole thing of misinformation about who Sheridan was and what Bandy did on Babylon 5, and she arrives near the end to just, you know, dispute that and say he was a great man.
Yeah,
it's a short scene, but it just, you know, as an old woman, it still showed the strength and power that she had and the conviction, and like how they all looked at her in awe.
Yeah,
the fact she was still alive, like, you know. And one of my favorite funny scenes is when she has the hair and she's trying to do it for the first time in season 2.
Ivanova has to tell her about shampoo.
Yeah, brilliant. But again,
my question for that was, does the bone float? So the hair goes down between it, or, you know, did they have to? Obviously, it did because it was a prosthetic. But for the Minbari, for her, was there a gap so her hair could flow down? Because otherwise, she should have had like short hair up here, or it should have flowed over the bone. to get her hairdo to do what it did. So there's a question nobody's ever asked. How did Delenn's hair flow down underneath her bone? Did it indeed, or did she like trim it here?
Yeah, that's. Can't say that's one I've ever thought of now, all right?
Well, my question to you would be, and I have some evidence here. What did you ever get to meet Mira, and what's your memory of that?
No, I never got to meet her. I mean, I did get an autograph,
right?
But not. I never got to attend a convention where she was speaking. Unfortunately, it's something I would love to have done. I did meet Michael O'Hare at Jump Point, the convention that Gary did back in the day, and Jerry Doyle. But no, unfortunately, no, I never met Mira. And apparently, she was extremely friendly and very nice to everybody who was looking after her. And yeah.
So that's my signed copy.
Yeah.
That's for autograph. So one of the it's actually one of the, let me see, I'm going through them here. I have Mira, Jerry, Claudia was here in Dublin.
Yeah.
At Forbidden Planet many years ago. Bruce was at so many Wolf conventions. I actually have Bruce's autograph on an action figure box as well. But some of the greats that have lost with, I don't know, would you call it a curse of Babylon 5? We've lost Andreas. We've lost Richard Biggs. We've lost so many of their.
Michael O'Hare to Coyotes.
What was Zach's name? The guy from Greece. What was his name?
Oh, Jeff Conway.
Jeff Conway. Lost Jeff Conway. So many people lost from B5. I never got to go to Jared's Babylon 5 events. Of course, those B5 events were the reason why. There she is, right at the start. Those B5 events were the very reason our VisiCon was not our. We didn't run it, but VisiCon was run in DCU, and unfortunately, while it worked great for Jared, it didn't do well for them. There's another. There's another one. There's another.
Andrew Brannigan was saying that Peter Jurassic was hilarious at DCU. Oh yeah, very nice.
That's one of the things I always get signed is cards. So that's one of my pieces that I have. Quite delighted. And then of course I just opened it up and discovered this another recent departing actor, Jeremy Bulloch. So that's my Jeremy Bulloch signed card. So that's the thing I do. I tend to get these cards signed. Jerry, Claudia, some more of my. Let's see.
Unfortunately, as far as I can remember back then, getting photo shoots with the actors wasn't really a thing. So
it was there's Steven's gone.
Yeah.
Jerry's gone. Claudia's still around, obviously, and Peter still around. Yeah. Yes, but back then, when the show was popular, the problem was at the time, I think it was in the UK at least, it was £10 for a photo shoot with the actor. And the thing about that was you then had, it was on film, so you had to take that roll of film, you had to run off to a photo place on a weekend and try and get them developed so that you could hand them back. And so I don't know what Jared's. I remember when we did Caritas ourselves with Andy Hallett, it was it was a run down to the photo place and a special arrangement with them for them to open up and use the machine on a Saturday to get it done. So I don't know if there was that opportunity when Jared had the guys over in the 90s. You were there, I wasn't. Was there a photo shoot with the guys?
Not that I recall, no. That's what I'm saying. I don't recall seeing photo shoots there. I was lucky enough to get a photo with Michael O'Hare at the time, but it wasn't a photo shoot. Just,
yeah.
Knew Jared and managed to get a shot with Michael,
Yeah.
Interestingly, it was a story of being an EMT was funny.
Was Ed Foster here as well?
I don't remember him being here. If he was, I didn't see him.
Was he here, Andrew?
I remember Jurassic being here, Michael Air being here, and as you said, Claudia Christian in Forbidden Planet.
Old Forbidden Planet, Austin Street.
Yeah. But
I was lucky enough. I remember Mira was doing something. Doing something. Oh, she was doing something in Ireland. I remember Dennis had her here. Dennis Rush. She'd come to Ireland, and this is 15 years ago. And she had an appearance booked on TV3, and Dennis had given me a shout to ask me to take her down. So I met Mira from the airport, and with her son, who was only 7 or 8 at the time, and I drove her out to TV3 in my hairdresser's Porsche, my Mazda 323F. And she was lovely. I had a lovely chat with her. She was so gracious. And I remember sitting in the green room with her because she asked me to keep an eye on her son, whose name escapes me right now. And I was trying to I remember I had a Palm Pilot or something at the time, which I used for my GPS. And on the Palm Pilot, I had a copy of Monkey Island, the LucasArts game. And that's what I used to keep him occupied while she was in the studio being interviewed by the TV3 presenters. And I did ask her before she went in. There's a big long one coming in there. Hi, Sharon Campbell-Shaw, and I'll get to that in a sec. Oh, hang on. Well, I'll finish my my story. But she was. I asked her just before she went on air, as we were sitting there, knowing what it's like being interviewed by newscasters who haven't a breeze about science fiction or anything in the realm. Nowadays we have so many people that are my age that grew up with this stuff that are into it. And we do have presenters that are clued in, like our own Ryan Tuberty and people on different radio stations. They're clued in now. I think there's one chap who's again, when I'm trying to think fast, the names escape me, and I apologize. One of our members of the Cuchulainn presents on a Dublin radio station. So there are people who know the crack these days, but back then very few presenters knew about what was going on in the science fiction world. It was all the kind of the cringeworthy type of thoughts of what we did, and what we did was very, very fringe back then, and all that type of thing where it's just the stereotype jokes and all that would come out. But I did ask her, what is the question that you get asked that you hate being asked by news presenters, and do you think they're going to ask it today? And she said, well, that's yes, that's an interesting way of putting a question. And she went, yes, for some reason they never asked me about my career as an actor in the former Yugoslavia. They never asked me what did I do on stage, or what were the arts like in Yugoslavia before it broke up. They always asked me about escaping the war. And I'm so tired of telling that story. I wish someone would ask me about what I do, not what I had to do. And I thought that was interesting, and I was like, oh, how very interesting. So she says what they tend to do is do a bit of research, see that I left Yugoslavia to escape the war, and then they concentrate on that because it's a big story. But I would love for someone to ask me about what was Yugoslavia like before that, and what was I doing on stage, and how did I start? But they never asked me that. So then I was sitting there, entertaining her son as we looked through the glass into the studio, and he kind of standing there going, "Oh, is that my mum? Is that mummy?" I was like, "There she is," And the first question, and I can't remember the TV3 presenter's name right now. Probably a good thing. And the first question they asked was, what was it like to leave Yugoslavia at the start of the war? The very first thing out of his mouth, and I just went, oh yeah. They didn't, you know, there wasn't even a lead up to it or anything like that. It was 5 minutes with her, or 10 minutes, however many minutes that she was on the air, and you know, it was basically, you know, let's ask this difficult. Let's ask you about the most difficult part of your life, not let's ask you about this wonderful show that she got very soon after arriving back in America, or not arriving back, but arriving in America, and only being tested by her not even signed to an agent. This agent said, well, we'll go for a couple of auditions and see how you do. And one of those auditions was Babylon 5, and she got it, and she had work for the next 5 years, which was fantastic for her. You know, herself and her husband had to just move and create a brand new life for them. And he was and they split up later on, I do believe. I could be wrong on that, but he was a director and she was an actor, and they had to, you know, nobody knew who they were, nobody knew what they did or what they had done. Complete start from scratch, and she was just lucky to get B5 when she got into America. But yeah, that was my experience of actually meeting her and sitting there and driving through Dublin with her and doing my best to kind of give her a quick drive through, you know, tour of what can we see on the way to TV3. You know, what's the most interesting? I don't even think the M50 was finished back then, or even a thing. TV3.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, like, as well, because after her passing there and looking at people's comments, everyone who had any dealings with her couldn't say anything nicer about her. Like, I mean, they just said she was really friendly, really nice to people, like, you know, and really engaging, you know. And then at the conventions herself, when she was, you know, doing talks and all the rest of it, she was very informative and very friendly and all that kind of stuff. So all around, yeah, she just seems to be a lovely person, you know. It is a pity that someone didn't actually think of asking a question like that she would have liked to answer. So just go back to who was it said this now? I can't see.
Sharon Campbell Shaw is saying something.
Sharon Campbell Shaw, yeah. So the modified epidermal layer at the back of the head. Interesting.
Okay. So somebody did answer that question at a convention at some stage. According to so which grows out from the temples and joins at the back like antlers in reverse. And I heard yes. Okay. So So somebody did actually ask that question many years ago.
And somebody then scrambled to make up an answer for it, so that if it's ever asked again, it's right there.
Yeah, right.
This one is from Andrew. Did anyone see Michael O'Hare's video done in '91 at Universal Studios? It's a Star Trek video with him as a Starfleet captain. No, I'd love to see it.
No. Wow.
In a maroon uniform fighting the Klingons.
Is that on YouTube, Lee? Lee, is that on YouTube? You gotta link that into the comments there, man.
Yeah, Lee, please. I'd love to see that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I'd love to see that one. Michael O'Hare, bringing that back to Michael O'Hare, another one of the stars from Babylon 5 we've lost. What about his character? You know, certainly Delenn, as we said there, was the central character of the show, maybe the most central character, even more so than the captains. But Michael O'Hare, you know, Sinclair, even though he left at the end of the first season, and you know, his storyline was tied up in season 3. You know, still very much a central character. It was always one of those things that kind of annoyed me when after the show was over, and you'd see posters, and there'd be of all the cast, even like Tracy Scoggins from season 5. A lot of them seemed to be missing the Sinclair character. And I was like, why? He's such a, you know, even though he was the first commander of Babylon 5, yes, he left, but his character is a very important part of the show and the whole mythos, like, you know.
Yeah.
So you imagine he would be part of all those combined posters and stuff, you know.
I can only guess as to reasons for that. Reasons could be, unfortunately for Michael and his mental state at the time, and his problems with Jerry Doyle. You know, he did, while JMS knew the real reasons of what was going on, he did leave under somewhat of a cloud. So within the marketing department, you don't know how that went over with the marketing department,
Right.
or any other, because luckily enough for Michael, no real press got out about it. It was basically, actor just gets replaced with a new captain in season 2, and nothing more said about it. There is the story of Jerry coming to blows with him, and so there was an element of that. But Michael did have problems, and you can go up online, and I'm sure you can read about that. Don't want to go too much into it. So that could have something to do with it. Marketing department looking at Bruce Boxleitner coming from The Scarecrow and Mrs. King. He's a little bit more marketable, and he's there right to the end. And of course, you're saying about Tracy Scoggins being in artwork and stuff. Well, the last team to be associated with the show would get the longer memory. If you've lasted till season 7 of this, like how often do you see when something's posted about Voyager? How often do they use the season 1 poster with Cass versus the season 7 poster, or something with 7 of 9? So that there's those type of things to can creep into that. Someone's saying there, Michael's character was a legacy character of the entire series and colored all the remaining series. Well, I mean, the whole thing is based around what Valen did and who Valen was. So
that's it. I mean, I think for me, it's because of the two, I preferred Sinclair. I always have done. I still do. I found to be, and I love Bruce Boxleitner's character. I thought Sheridan's a great character, but very much a Captain Kirk kind of character. Gung ho, and that did develop over time. But Sinclair was a much more haunted character.
Yeah,
haunted by
it goes along the lines of your favorite type of storyline. Season 1 is very much a darker show. Sinclair is very much a darker commander. While he does have his light moments, which is actually quite nice. His moments with Jerry Doyle are some great scenes.
Yeah, the friendship between Sinclair and Garibaldi is quite something. And sorry,
fasten zip or zip fasten?
Oh, zip and fast. Fast and zip. It's got to be fast and zip. Yeah, totally. And then, of course, he was dealing with PTSD, and he was dealing with the hole in his mind, the memory loss of 24 hours at the Battle of the Line, which is so much mystery to Sinclair.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed him as a character. But, it's still, I suppose, wonderful that it's part of the whole mythos of what Babylon 5 is, as someone said there. Lee Raythorn said, I do love when Naroon talks to Sinclair, you talk like a Mambari. Says to Sinclair, you talk like a Mambari.
You talk like a Mambari.
Yeah. And it was almost like that was a little bit of foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Really, when you think about it afterwards, So, yeah, absolutely.
Naroon was the first warrior cast that we concentrated on.
That's interesting.
One. Sinclair was hard. Okay, who said that one? Oh, Anne.
There's definitely something Picardish about him, all right. I can see where she's going there, all right.
I mean, a lot of shows would have to brush a closeness with the Next Generation. The Next Generation being the most successful show on a sci-fi show on at the time.
Yeah.
You had Babylon 5 being created in 93. And don't forget, you also had Sequest ESV being created in 93. Sequest was written by Rockney S. O'Bannon, who went on later on to create Farscape. But season 1 of Sequest is very much, it's Star Trek underwater. It's Star Trek Next Generation underwater. You've got all the characters are there, Roy Scheider is playing Picard, and Lucas Wallenchek, the late who played Lucas? People, Jonathan Brandis. Sorry, brain fart. But Jonathan Brandis playing Will Wheaton's character. Of Wesley Crusher. So even Dr. Westphalen, the Doctor, was Beverly Crusher. She was. There's so many parallels with Sequest and the Next Generation. So Babylon 5 was okay. It was going down a different direction. JMS had such, he wasn't doing episodic. He was doing a serialized storyline. But there would have to have been those influences of, well, look, this is what's working. We need a little bit of this to at least the viewers, you know.
Yeah, very much so. And the fact that they were doing something a little different, you know, TNG was so big, you know, to get a storyline that was completely different and was, you know, the humans weren't all wonderful and all our problems hadn't been solved, and you know, we still had politics and we still had all that stuff going on in Babylon 5. You know what I mean? It just, I felt it sci-fi, yes, but it was more real.
Andrew
Marcus
Brannigan.
Cole referencing getting a straight answer from Ranger One on Minbar was hilarious. Yeah. Yeah, another great character. Speaking of great characters, you know, we were talking about Sinclair and his central role to the whole storyline, and Delenn being, you know, the linchpin and you know, the glue that held it all together. Would you say that then that G'Kar was the heart of the show?
G'Kar was the heart of the show. G'Kar, but again, another character that developed. You know, like in The Gathering, he's a very different character. He's abrasive. Yeah. He's, you know, Narns. He's racist. This is you know, he's very much. Well, he was always outspoken. But the development of G'Kar from, you know, once they involved the Narn religion and the Book of Jaquan, and then G'Kar, while he is incarcerated for 30 days and singing and annoying everybody else in the cell block, he writes the Book of G'Kar and everything that he's learned. So that's, you know, that's an interesting arc for his character being what he was at the start and then what he became at the very end. And actually, even though Andreas hasn't lasted, unfortunately, G'Kar and Londo are actually some of the longest lived characters within the show. You know, that's the prophecy of, you know, and they both know how, like, I will die with his fingers around my neck. And then, of course, and then that's the thing, you know, and that's the great Spock McCoy was always the kind of analysis between Londo and G'Kar, where they're both enemies that do terrible things to each other, but they stay with each other right till the end. They're best friends that have never forgot their grievances. It's such a strange dynamic, and one of the best elevator episodes ever done on any show was an actual elevator episode.
Yeah,
Peter and Andreas in an elevator.
And they acted their socks off as usual.
Yeah, and it's just the two of them lying down there on the thing, just, you know, telling each other to shut up, but they're getting everything off their chest.
Yeah,
you know, they come to an agreement, but then also when they leave the leave the lift, it's, you know, we're back to normal now almost. Even though it you know, it was a television return to normal, JMS wouldn't let that happen. So much changed in that episode, even though they spent the next few episodes kind of going back to where they were before that happened. But the characters' relationship had really changed, and that was a big exploration.
It was, absolutely, yeah.
So just, yeah, Marcus is just agreeing there.
Oh yes, absolutely.
You know, and it shows the great writing that JMS had for the show, where so much was developed. So many important story points, arc story points, character development was done, but also a rake of humor in there as well. So it wasn't just exposition. It's, you know, there was comedy in there. You know, there was you know, G'Kar constantly laughing at Londo, and Londo just constantly, you know, why am I in this lift with you? And it's like, I wouldn't be in any other place. This is brilliant, fantastic. And if I die, you die with me.
I get to watch you die, and I don't have to do a thing. Yeah, brilliant. Because that was after the sequences in season 2. Don't want to give too much away, where, you know, the relationship between, as you say, Ambassador Londo and Ambassador G'Kar have changed due to the circumstances and the events at the end of season 2. But again, that brings me to one of I think G'Kar's finest moments, that speech when he goes into the council you know, and London was said that citizen Jakar can no longer be here.
Yeah.
And you know, Andrea stands up as Jakar and gives that speech about no dictator, no invader, you know, can hold people together by force of arms forever. Like, you know, it was like,
yeah,
the delivery, it was just superb, and just a
but
pure example of the quality of acting, you know.
But it's an interesting, you know, that's an interesting change for that character. Like if you look,
Yeah.
if anybody goes and looks at that, looks at his scenes with Lieutenant Commander, is it Nakamura or Takamura in the Gathering, and what he's like in that, and then, you know, bring him to that speech about freedom and no dictator. You know, the difference between what sort of a Narn he is there, and then 3 years, 4 years later, or well, what are we, 2 years later, 3 years later? You know, so huge change in the type of character and how that character is written as well. You know, and how he was portrayed. So yeah, it was, you know, so that, and that's the great thing about the development, the character development, is that what are you posting there, Andrew? Andrew's posting a link.
I'm looking at it. I think it's a link to that particular speech.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, which is just
send us that Michael O'Hare in a Starfleet uniform thing. If, you know.
Yeah, I think he did actually. Yeah, he has put it up, so I'll check that out. Thanks, Lee, for that.
Oh, he must have put it on the. He must have put it on the actual Cuchulainn. Oh no, there it is. I see it. Yep.
Yeah, it's here on the Facebook one anyway that I'm looking at. So I'll check that out. Marcus says in the fans, "Hey Marcus, how you doing?" Yeah, Jakar and all the stuff in the elevator was hilarious, says Marcus. It was, yeah, just another great Babylon 5 moment of humor, you know. Andrew says, "Yeah, I love Jakar's speech about freedom." And Grace, classic Statler and Waldorf from the Muppets.
Well, I mean,
absolutely. I know where you're going there now. Yeah,
it's
first episode of the Gathering, isn't it?
Sorry,
Andrew Bryan put up a comment to say Takashima.
Yeah, Takashima. That's Lieutenant Commander Takashima. That's I couldn't get her name right, so it's Lieutenant Commander.
Yeah. You know, Andrew made a comment, and I was just thinking about it. Like you were talking about how the character had changed. You know, that scene in The Gathering where, you know, the Narns have no telepaths. It's a gene deficiency, he thinks, like, you know, so they're looking to create Narn telepaths. So they approach Lita.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, now we can take your DNA and do it this way, but it'd be more efficient just mating. You know, how would you feel about that? The only thing I would need to know is what your pleasure threshold is. Yeah, so
I showed you that Babylon 5 was a little bit more adult as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was way ahead of its time. You know, I mean, you're talking about mid-90s, particularly with American sci-fi. They weren't doing long storylines like that. Everything was episodic.
It was all episodic. You couldn't do long storylines. There was no cursing, as we said before on other streams. You know, the first show to push the boat was Odyssey 5. And Odyssey 5 actually didn't do very well because it was 5 years ahead of itself. It was, if Odyssey 5 was out now, it would be, you know, lost among the throngs of things. Like I said to you before we just started, I've just finished watching Lower Decks, and that's another thing. You know, I have opinions on. This is a Babylon 5 thing. I'm not going to go into it. But they approached cursing in a different way. And again, it's an animated show, and I thought it was going to aim at a younger audience. Oh my God, it's not. You know, and they're cursing in almost every episode, but they've approached the cursing with beeping it, which was not as jarring. And I let it flow because they recognized that they were cursing and it had to be beeped, as opposed to I didn't quite like it in Discovery. It didn't. It just was. It sat wrong with me in Discovery. So, you know, and maybe that's, you know, and Discovery have referenced that themselves now in the last season. But Lower Decks, you know, it's cursing left, right, and center, but it's beeping it out. So I was like, oh, let that go. And the dialogue in Lower Decks is so fast, I'm going to have to rewatch it. But Babylon 5. There's another thing I watched. There's a team out there. I don't know if it's a one person or team, but obviously because I watch so much sci-fi on YouTube, it comes up in my recommended feed so often. There's somebody out there, and they are redoing all the Babylon 5 effects. And I haven't read into it. If anybody else, Lee or Andrew, they're probably watching this guy as well. And it's not that he's changing it or updating the texture maps or anything like that, but he's rendering the CG out at 4K, which is something that's really, really missing from the DVDs. The DVDs, of course, because the post-production was done in 4:3 and JMS cleverly shot it in 16:9, but it does mean that the resolution of the stuff it's smaller, and then it's pulled out for any effects shot. PPG of Vorlon being seen, or any of the CG for the spaceships, it's all mush because it's a widescreen taking of a 4:3 image that's been blown up. And it's this person who is out there is redoing all the CG, and it looks fantastic. It's just such a pity we can't get that onto the DVDs, or actually get a re-release, or even if Warner Brothers bought the footage off this chap to put it back in, which they'd never do, because obviously they never hired him, and it's the same reason why the lost episodes of Doctor Who, there's somebody out there with them on a tape. So there's a guy in the UK has some of the lost episodes, but when the BBC found out and they approached him and said, can we have those episodes, please? He said, give me £100 or something. And they went, no, there are episodes. And he went, well, you can't have them. You're going to have to buy them off me. And they went, but you illegally recorded them. Well, it's a good thing I did. It was this back and forth argument of, it's a good thing I illegally recorded them. And so I have them, but if you want them, you're going to have to buy them off me. Graphics toasters. Yes, they were done with the stronger Amiga computers. And when they did River of the Lost Tales. Was a behind the scenes video I did watch about the Lost Tales, where they said that the computing power that they had in the noughties for making the Lost Tales they were able to render the same resolution for the graphics in real time as it took days to render back in the 90s. That's how much the computing had advanced. So the quality of the CG had changed so much. So the guy who's doing these, if he has had, it looks to me like he can't have redone everything from scratch. I'm wondering, did he get his hands on the files from back then and is just using modern technology? Because he could almost render them out real time, and make some little modifications in regards to quality, but and he's rendering them out in 4K. But if you're rendering them out in 768 to 576, which is all 3, the computers could just churn that out as if it was a video game now, because video games are so much vastly ahead of where they were back in the 93. So I'd love to know what his actual process is. Does he have the original files? Is he rendering those out? But if you go up onto YouTube and look for Babylon 5 CG in 4K, you'll find this guy's work.
Wow, I must have a look at that. It'd be interesting to see just how it would look, because yes, they were at the early stages of CGI on TV with Babylon 5, and certainly, the first season particularly, you may struggle. I think they did improve as they went along, and with the effects that they were creating, and by the time you get to season 3, where everything kicks off and you're getting into the big battles, they're done extremely well. So, and the fact that they ended up working for the DS9 show,
Image D or Foundation Imaging, one of those.
Something like that, yeah. But he ended up doing the big fleet battles and all the rest of it on Deep Space Nine as well, such was the work that they did on Babylon 5, But just going back to the characters, another one that we lost that was just an amazing character as well was Richard Biggs as Dr. Franklin.
Richard Biggs, Lovely man as well.
Lovely man, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Another great character. I think one of the standout episodes for me, and just portrays his ability as an actor, was Believers in the very first season.
Oh, that's the family with the child, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the family with the child, and
it's a difficult one. You know, like if you put yourself into that ethical position, you know, not just going, well, this is the way it is because this is right and I believe this, but you know, if you think it's a very Star Trek episode, even though he doesn't do the Starfleet thing. It's a Starfleet conundrum, and JMS it must have purposely gone, I'm going to make him do the non-Starfleet thing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to make him do the human thing, what he, you know, and you know, it's a tough one, but it just shows you, you know, how clued in JMS is, because there are people with religious beliefs that strong here, you know. So I mean, that is that's a tough watch, that one. You know, when
it is a tough watch. It's a showcase on his acting ability. It's just brilliant, but yeah, it's a tough watch. And again, as you say, very much close to the bone. There are people out there who have faiths that, you know, go along similar lines. You know, won't take, say, transfusions, or they won't have operations or any of that kind of stuff. You know, he's pretty much telling a story of people with that type of faith.
Yeah.
You know, put up against a person who, you know, is a doctor, is a scientist, is a medical person, and his first and foremost, you know, priority is saving lives.
Well, it's like that. Is it Jehovah's Witnesses that, you know, if they need a blood transfusion or something like that, they won't do it?
They won't do it. Yeah, I can't remember what it is. I think maybe those, but yeah, that's the dilemma that he faced in that episode, and the decisions he made, as you say, was very non-Starfleet, but very human.
Yeah.
And he sees, and the consequences of that do come back to him. You know, so you know, it is, as you said, another example of the writing that JMS was bringing to the show. Like, you know, even from a very early stage, you're talking about a first season episode there, you know, and dealing with topics of that nature, you know.
Anne and Marcus have a couple of questions there. Marcus has answered Anne's question. What storyline, if any, do you feel lacked completion in Babylon 5? Marcus says the telepath war. I'm guessing you feel that lacked completion. I can, you know, with the popularity of the show waning in season 5, and, you know, so many different issues we've already discussed, I don't think it lacked completion. I think they needed to move away from it very quickly because they realized that the show wasn't being successful. You know, airtime, they need to sell airtime, ads for airtime, and they need to move on from. JMS is very, you know, he doesn't leave loose ends very often. He ties up as many loose ends as he can. You know, I'm sure he has his Bible, he knows where he wants to go, but if something happens in the past, he'll generally try and tidy it up. So I'm sure I think the telepath war, though, I think it was completed. I think they got to an end. It was probably rushed. It probably wasn't taken care of.
The telepath war wasn't really dealt with. I mean, it wasn't meant to be a part of the B5 storyline, so there's no lack of completion there. It was, I think, going to be a factor in Crusade,
right?
Which was shortly after the telepath war. In fact, you know, I loved Crusade. It was so much potential, but had too much studio interference. But they got 14 episodes, if I remember correctly. The next episode was to be a Bester episode,
right?
After the telepath war. I was going to delve into that, and of course, one of the telepath on the ship, you know, is a telepath that's following the new regulations that came about as a result of the telepath war. I think the Crusade would have delved into that quite a bit more. It wasn't really a part of the Babylon 5 storyline, so I don't feel it. You know, I know where he's coming from, but I don't think it's one that wasn't completed. It's just one that would have been told in a different medium, Crusade.
Different series. I'd like to know what happened to Drawl on Epsilon 3.
Yeah. I was going to say the Techno Mages.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, they, you know, and again, I think Crusade would have dealt with that. You know, you had Galen on the ship there in Crusade, and there was a couple of episodes where they did speak something of what Dector Mages were doing, and I think that so the Crusade would have explored, because the thing about Crusade, just to go on to that for a second, it was never meant to be about the looking for the cure of the Drac Plague throughout the show. It was meant to last maybe 2 seasons at most,
right?
And then it was going to be resolved, and then they'd go into exploring other things. The Hand was going to be the big bad, I think. You know, they would have delved more into the history behind the telepaths.
Is that the big green hand from Star Trek just holding the ship?
Yeah, the big green hand from Star Trek. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I don't know about stories that are not completed. What did they think? I know they mentioned the telepath war. Was there anything else they feel?
Well, Leah's mentioning Thrall and the Great Machine. I don't know if that was an incomplete story. I think that was just me. You know, Thrall will still be there with a half a dozen Zathras, doing what he was always doing. You know, there always will need to be someone in the Great Machine. You know, well,
or Zathras.
Well, the Zathras and the Zathras.
Okay, but what about Zathras?
No, he's not the one.
He's not the one. Okay.
Not the one.
Are you sure he's not the one? Not the one. What?
Not the one.
Not the one. Not the one.
But I mean, the station in Sleeping in the Light was you know, destroyed. It went beyond its use. I presume that Thrall was still down there, you know, on Epsilon 3. You know, so in that particular area of space, they thought that it was chosen because it was neutral space. Nobody thought anything was there, but there was Thrall down, you know, and the original Thrall was down there. And then, of course, I can't remember the original actor, but then John Shook replaced Thrall in the Minbari, who took over the Great Machine. So I think the Great Machine is still down there. I think something was mentioned about the Great Machine, but it was one of those kind of, I'm going to explain this away in one person's piece of dialogue. You know, it wasn't concentrated on.
Yeah, I can see where he's going. It's kind of like that. It kind of disappeared from, you know, the general storyline after its work was done in sending the White Star back in time to deal with the issues for Babylon 4. You know, you didn't really hear much about it then after that.
Yeah. The Great Machine was so powerful. It was the Great Machine was left over from the time of the first ones, right? That's how powerful of a machine it is. So it can rip a hole in space and send people where, you know, things where it needs to go, Sector 14. But yeah, I mean, John Shook played a great character in that, and of course Mira Furlan was you know, a sidekick to him for the start, because Thrall was a friend of Delenn to begin with, but in the later seasons it's Ivanova who has to deal with him. You know, so yeah, I mean, there's so much that the show had to tell, but I don't think there was anything that he didn't wrap up. I mean, there's storylines that didn't. I said it earlier on. Storyline, stuff that was going somewhere, and then because an actor, you know, didn't come back or didn't renew a contract or wasn't taken back, you know, Judy Caitlin Brown with the Natoth, she didn't really get. Didn't get completion in the way that, you know, at the end of season 2 she disappeared. Then she was mentioned, then she became a plot point later on, but you never saw her. You never saw her.
That's one that has come to mind when you speaking of Natoth and Judy Caitlin Brown, Andrea Thompson and Talia Winters. Because it seemed like they were going down the road that from Mind War, where she'd been given the ability of telekinesis.
Yeah.
And then obviously she went, Lita came back, and we didn't see anything more from that.
Again, I think that was the actress, you know, leaving the show. She didn't renew her contract. I don't know. Like, these are the things from back then, and things that you wouldn't be able to find out as easily back then. Was, you know, like nowadays shows assign actors for multiple years. They did back then. I mean, the reason why Tom Selleck wasn't Indiana Jones was because he was signed to do Magnum PI. The reason why Timothy Dalton got James Bond when he did was because they originally offered it to Pierce Brosnan, and they'd finished Remington Steele, but when he got offered Bond, they went, oh, he's a commodity, and they did another series of Remington Steele, which meant that because that contract became, was activated and held on to, Pierce couldn't do it, and he ended up not doing it until GoldenEye, almost 10 years later. So there's still that type of thing, but that was when an actor is signed to hold them for that particular project until they can get going. Now when they sign actors, they'll sign an actor into a contract and say, well, you're doing a 3-movie deal. You're signed into that contract, or you're signed into a 5-year deal. I don't know what sort of contracts the actors were signing back in the 90s, especially with a show like B5, which didn't have an awful lot of money to be able to hold someone for, so many years. And
because I think it was almost year to year, wasn't it? Because I seem to remember reading somewhere that Andreas was being offered a more extended role in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, I think, because they were trying to pull him from Babylon 5.
Right. Yeah.
And he said no. He was enjoying what he was doing as Jakar, and continued on with that, thankfully. And just to go back to something you were saying there, it's a different chat completely, maybe sometime, but with Pierce Brosnan not doing Bond until GoldenEye because of Remington Steele, thank goodness for that, because I love Timothy Dalton as Bond. I think after Sean Connery, he's my favorite right now. I mean, again, for the same reasons as others, like he's a much darker Bond, he's much closer to Sean Connery, and he's much closer to the books. Pierce Brosnan too much of a pretty boy for me, like as a Bond character.
Well, you don't know.
Great, but the other ones after that, but anyway, that's another chat.
On that, Live and Let Die and The Living Daylights, the scripts would have still been the same, and the directors could have been the same. So Pierce Brosnan's portrayal, at least in the first one, could have been closer to Dalton in because that's the storyline that he was given, or that's the script that they were going to do. So you don't know. There's it's a team effort. Obviously, he would have portrayed it a lot differently to Dalton. It would have ended up being what it became. But in his first instance of it, what was it going to be? Would have been closer to Dalton's portrayal, because that's what was the storyline. That's what was in the script. So there's chicken egg stuff going on there. It's a pity, B5, didn't get where it wanted to go, but also again we're left with an amazing show, and before we leave off, because we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes now. It's almost like a curse. So many of Star Trek actors have stuck around. Doctor Who actors have stuck around. But Babylon 5 just seems to have had a very tough time with the loss of so many actors. Like even if we switch over to the different view here with the view behind us, the only person that's still alive that we can see when we shrink down our videos is Peter. Peter.
Claudia's there as well, obviously, but the only one you can see there in that picture at the moment is Peter. Yeah. It's very sad looking at that. It's particularly if you're a fan of the show, and you've followed it through from the beginning to the end and gotten to know the characters. And you and I, we went to quite a few Babylon 5 conventions in the mid-90s over in the UK, and the Wolf events and all that kind of stuff. Got to meet many of those actors and listen to their talks. And you were lucky enough, I think, weren't you, to get to the one in Blackpool where all the crew were there. Were you at that one?
That one? No.
You didn't get that one either?
I've heard the stories of that was a Wolf 359 event. I know what happened there. The fire alarm went off, and Walter Koenig was there with all the rest of the car. And so Walter Koenig did his guest talk on the back lawn behind the Norbrecht Castle main space. So yeah, there was anyone who was at that. That was just before we started. I think that was the event before we. What was it? We did Crusade in '98. 359 Crusade. I remember there was 2 that we did back then. And man, the cost, I think it was £1,500 at the time for us just to go for that weekend. It was, oh my God, it was unbelievably
Yeah.
Because flights back then were £350 just to get into Heathrow. There was nobody flying to Gatwick, and there was no Ryanair really. You know, and we stayed in the Radisson Edwardian for the weekend. With myself, yourself, and Alan O'Shea. And man, that was, you know, and we had our cosplay stuff with us, and you know, an amazing weekend. Like, I mean, that was my first big British one, and it was a great time. Loads of people. We met so many people that we know 23 years later. Still to this day, we're in contact with them, which is fantastic. I do know, I always say it, and a mutual friend of ours, a chap named Simon Drew, did the most amazing Londo.
Amazing Londo. Yeah,
his Londo was fantastic back then at that event, and yeah, it's those were the kickoff of going to the UK for events for me. But I remember it cost an absolute packet, especially when there was loads of actors back then. They were able to get quite a number of actors.
Yeah,
and you know,
was that the year that you know, Bob Bruce and Jerry were there, and they played a game of tennis?
Yeah.
Do you remember? But that was that year, wasn't it?
That was yeah. And I wasn't into the show that much. I went because everybody was going. I hadn't actually seen the show. The first episode I ever saw, I remember, was Severed Dreams, and I didn't even watch it. It was just on when we were at one of Jared Keating's Shakari days, and I saw this. I do remember the Agamemnon flying into the shot, but I didn't particularly watch or pay attention. And then everybody was going mad about it at War Without End, at VisiCon and all that. I do remember all that, but I didn't sit down to watch it till very, very much later. And I think it was, God, it must be 10 years later, because I had to wait for someone to give it to me on VHS. More than likely it was you. Or you, or but just before we finish there, Anne has to go. And she's saying there, Mira's light will never be extinguished. While we remember, you know, between the candle and the dark, we are grey. You know,
there's an interesting one from Lee as well. There, has anyone watched Space Command? Mira Furlan, Bill Mummy, Bruce Boxleitner, Robert Picardo, Doug Jones.
Was it any good? Yes, I did watch it. It's terrible. I'm sorry. I did watch it. I do commend anybody who's able to go and get something made, shot, finished. As I said before, you know, as someone who makes films when I can myself, I'm always impressed when someone can actually finish a project. Unfortunately, Space Command, I don't know. As a filmmaker, I can analyze it in different ways. You have people who look, and you look at it and you go, well, where did it go wrong? Because these actors have obviously done fantastic jobs in other shows. They're presented well in other shows. You know, Doug Jones is the creature in so many things, in so many big movies that are amazing. It would be, if you have seen Of Gods and Men, which is James Cawley's Star Trek show, shot in James Cawley's set, the Star Trek one with Nichelle Nichols, Walter Koenig, Alan Rook, J.G. Hertzler, all shot on the classic Star Trek sets, kind of set in whenever, you know, the Enterprise B would be flying around, and they hauled the Enterprise out of mothballs. That's up on YouTube, Star Trek or Gods and Men. It's a fan production, and it's also very weak, you know. And the acting, you're looking at the acting going, you guys are in amazing stuff and you've done amazing stuff. So you're going to go, and was it the director? Is it the editing? Is it the framing? And I don't know, part of me feels that part of it is to do with, there's so many different arguments, and you have this discussion quite a lot about making film. If your story and presentation is compelling, people will watch it on anything. Sure, people watch shite on phones these days, you know, so the quality is terrible and drives me up the wall. Whereas, like, why do you accept that quality and why do you accept that framing? It's terrible, but if the content is entertaining, people will watch it. So there's some, so that's an argument against quality. However, there is a look and a feel that you get from high-end cameras, from, Star Trek and B5, all shot on film. There's a certain feel that you get from film. There's a certain feel that you get from cine lenses, as opposed to the feel that you get from something being recorded on video. So, I mean, the simplest example of video is, this is video. So it gives a real feeling. It's what you would see, more closer to what you would feel in person, because it's video. The filmic look, the 24 frames a second filmic look on a cine lens with the right depth of field, gives a different feel to the audience. And whether you understand it or not, whether you can regurgitate it and do your own or not, anybody who lives today that has grown up with television and the cinema at their doorstep or in their homes, you know how to read that language. You may not know how to, present it back to anybody, and even someone like myself who's studied it and has worked in it for 20 years, 25 years, even I find it very difficult to get to be successful at doing that is still difficult, even with all the knowledge you have. But majority of people in the Western world know how to read that. And so when you're reading something like Space Command and you're looking at it going, there's something it's just off, there's something there, and, you're trying to figure it out. And to me, I think it's because it's a low budget quality thing. They necessarily didn't have the money or the budget or the time to shoot it properly, even though they managed to get these actors that we know and love from other productions, Star Trek and Babylon 5. So, it's tough. And sometimes, and I know myself, inexperienced directors or directors with only starting out or with a lack of experience. And I know myself, because I've been in that position where you have people with a name behind them or, a body of work behind them. And you're like, well, I've done a couple of shorts. Who am I to pull something else out of this actor? Obviously, this actor is doing their best work. They're not someone who turns up and shies away from doing something good. But there is a point where a director has to pull a performance out of people. You got to try and get them to the next level and say, well, but there is that fear. I know when I did those couple of days with Mickey Rourke, I wasn't particularly the director. I was the first AD, but I ended up having to kind of direct it because I could speak English and the director was a Spanish speaker. So I had to go in and negotiate with Mickey Rourke to get this performance out of him. But you're also dealing with someone of that level who, on the first day, after 3 hours, they walk off the door, they shake your hand and go, thanks very much for a good day. And you're like, but you've only done 3 hours. Now, how do you go and run after that superstar and argue with them going, no, we're paying you for this much, you have to stay. And then you have to deal with that bad energy for the rest of the day, and you're trying to pull energy, a portrayal out of an actor. So with Space Command, all those things that I'm talking about there, what was it? I really don't know.
I haven't seen it, so I can't judge myself. I might check it out. Considering what who Lee is saying is in it, I would check it out just to judge that for myself and have a look and see what I think. I'm definitely going to check out the link that Lee sent about Michael O'Hare in a Starfleet Maroon uniform, just to see what that's about as well. Yeah, but as you say, look, I mean, we're probably over our time now at the moment, so thanks very much everybody for joining us and talking more about one of my absolute favorite shows, a show with just phenomenal characters. Thanks, John, for joining me as well for that. The episode chats I'm hoping to do every couple of weeks, and so if anybody has anything they would like to actually talk about, or any suggestions they would like to make as to what would be an interesting discussion, do come back to me. You're more than welcome to join us on the streaming chat live and comment as you have been doing. And if there's any particular issues, shows, sci-fi generally, anything like that you'd like to have a chat about, with the lockdown being the way it is, it's hard for people to get together and just chat. And we can use this as a format for people to chat about things they like to do as well. It's not just about me rambling on about shows that I like. so yeah, do indeed let us know what you'd like to talk about, and we'll see if
Or
we
me
can
rambling
schedule
on.
or two of us rambling on together. Like we went the last time, we went on for 3 hours chatting. But do let us know. We'd be more than happy to schedule one in about a topic that people might be interested in chatting about. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. And thank you very much for joining us, guys.
Before we go, for me, I didn't do a maker chat this weekend. Did one like about a week ago, but I've been in the shop, so I've been working on this thing. So it's not finished yet, and I'm currently organizing the electronics to get this working. So obviously this is the Neutrona one from the Ghostbusters Proton Pack, and this is how far along I am.
I was going to say it's a really complicated lightsaber.
It is really a complicated lightsaber. But yeah, Dermot Kernan from Ghostbusters Dublin has been helping me out with the build. So yeah, I'm wiring up the electronics right now because I've glued in all the lights and the switches and stuff like that. So I'm going to try and get that done this evening. But yeah, that's how far I am. Anybody who's been following the Maker Chats, that's where I am. But because I was so buried in actually getting this thing to work, I haven't done anything recently. So but yeah, and as I said in my own streams on the Maker Chats is when I'm in the mood to actually present something. So but when I'm trying to bury deep in, I find that people aren't so interested in watching and chatting while I'm working. I think the kind of the more successful Maker Chats are show and tells. It's like, here's what I have done this week and explain that, and this is what I came up against. And it's a more of I think people tend to respond better to a show and tell than particularly me kind of chatting away while I'm doing something down here, even though I might have another camera on it. I'd be interested to know people's comments on how they feel, what sort of a Maker Chat, if they tune into that, what would they prefer? A Maker Chat with multiple people like we had with Robbie and Mark the last time, me actually doing stuff and figuring stuff out on a live stream, or I'll do a whole heap of work and then come and do a show and tell. So if anybody wants to put that in the comments as to how they would like to see the Maker Chats go during lockdown too.
Great. All right, guys. Well, listen, thanks very much. We're going to head off now, and the only way we can, end that is with a signature of Bester, "Be Seeing You." Bye, guys.
Be seeing you.
Be seeing you.